For those of you who are also new, that you may not know, who's this guy talking? I'm Gary, and I'm the minister here at the chapel. And the reason why we're able to do such successful things is because I have an incredible chapel board that helps keep everything on track. And if you're a member of our chapel board, would you just stand for a moment? Thank you so much for your leadership and in your engagement. So tonight, what we have tonight is we'll have Lou and Jean to talk, and also we have a video. It's available on Vimeo, if you're ever familiar. It's like Yahoo, but it's like YouTube, but it's called Vimeo, V-I-M-E-O, and that link is available on Vimeo. So if you missed the whole video, it's a 52-minute video, but we're not playing all 52 minutes because we're able to do a little bit of editing. But Lou's story is pretty much part of, encapsulated in that video, and so that's why we have the screen and the video tonight. All right? So our speakers night is hosted by two individuals. They are the leaders of this particular program, and it's tonight we have Mr. Lee Schmaltz. Bill Murphy is also his co-director of our speakers night, but I'd like to introduce Lee Schmaltz to you. Let's give a warm welcome to Lee.
Thank you, Gary. First of all, an awesome turnout tonight, and it's a really credit to Lou, and I'm sure he's blessed to see you all here. This speaker series is the first of this season, but it's the seventh in a series that we started back in 2020. And you'll, on your way out, we'll have information about the next speaker series, which is in January. But we'll have a speaker series, like Gary mentioned, every month up through April. But very interesting information at that point. The remarkable thing to think about is there's over 700 people that have been part of the speaker series. 700 people represents half of Mariners Sands have been involved in our speaker series. So we're blessed to have you here tonight and blessed to have them as part of our program. At this point, what I just want to, the flow of the evening will be, I will introduce Jean Pollock here. She will then introduce Lou. But Jean is kind of the force behind tonight. She has actually encouraged Lou to go to the Netherlands to make a presentation there to people that really sheltered him during World War II. But Jean and Lou are partners at this point, so she will take that on. But we'll do, at that point, Lou will talk a little bit about really the video that's coming up. After that, we'll have time for question and answers. And following that, then Gary will wrap up the whole evening. But we're thrilled to see, and I would say, what was registered here, we probably have over 200, 225 people here, and we thank you very much for being here there. So I now want to just mention a little bit about Jean. She's not, the hallmark of Mariners Sands to me is that people are very unpretentious. You never know who you're sitting next to. People don't really talk about themselves. So Jean's not going to talk about herself. I will say something about her, so at least you know who is going to speak. At this point, she's graduated from Marymount, Manhattan College in New York. Family with 3 daughters, I believe, and 4 grandkids at that point. She and Lou are partners at this stage. She's been a member since 2012 here in Mariners Sands, and you'll see her out in the tennis court, I'm sure, from time to time. But important to her background is remarkable, and she won't tell you this, but in Wilson, Connecticut, She developed a children's theater program. She developed a music program in Wilton. And what else did you do? No, she developed 3 different programs in the arts as well. 3 programs that she founded in Wilton, Connecticut. Also was the founder of 2 businesses that covered the state of Connecticut. She's a keynote speaker to banks and professional organizations in the area. She is a chaplain at, I guess it's Westchester County Medical Center and St. Anthony's Catholic Hospital in New York area. There's probably more to say about her, but without further ado, like Johnny Carson would say, here's Jean.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. You have no idea how meaningful this is. And what you don't realize is that you are part of Lou's healing. I know some of you are here because you like Lou. Some of you are here because you love Lou. He's very lovable. And some of you are here because your spouse, your wife, your husband said, we should go, we really should. And you have no idea why you're here. Let me tell you why you're here. Tonight is a story about a family who were willing to risk their lives, their 5 children's lives, and the husband's parents' lives for an 8-year-old boy who they did not know. I'm going to give a synopsis because Lou does not like talking about his life. And in fact, I'm still learning about it. There is a wall that went up after this tragedy and after this trauma for him to cope. And so you will see a video, and I'm very grateful that we hired a team to do the video. But I want to tell you what it was really like. When I first met Lou, and this is very personal, you know when you get together for the first time, would you like to have coffee? And you know it's not about coffee. There was a little chit-chat. And then he leaned forward, looked straight in my eyes, and he says, do you know that I'm a Jew? I leaned back. I said, yes. As if he didn't hear me, he said, you mean you know I'm a Jew? I said, yes. Are you all right with that? I said, yes. And then he says, and you can handle it? And I said, yes. What he was doing was deciding whether I was there with them or I could accept him. And I, in my gut, felt there's so much pain there. There is so much pain. He didn't tell me anything about what I'm about to tell you, but he needed to know in his gut where I was and what I could feel for him. When he showed me his baby pictures, he's an adorable baby. Oh, how gorgeous. White blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of baby you just want to pick up and hug. He was gorgeous. And there are pictures with his mother sitting holding him in a park, Vendel Park in Amsterdam, and pictures of his father, this proud father, and pictures of his 2 brothers. The whole family was beaming. His father was an insurance man. And being from his background, he had made it. When Lou was born, his mother was 23 and his father was 33. Life was good. They bought a beautiful home in a middle-class neighborhood, picturesque, Dutch, beautiful. And then things changed. a lunatic started talking about killing the Jews. That started. At 6 years old, life changed. He will calmly on this screen stand and say to you, oh, that was my bedroom. He is calmly going to show you the thousands of names of Jews that were killed and over 200 Reens that are killed, and point to where his grandmother's name is. He does this calmly in order to survive. They heard they're coming for us. They heard. And you can imagine they're protecting a little boy, a child. He started kindergarten, started first grade. All of a sudden, the word starts. They take him out of their home. They lose their home. Imagine what would happen to us if someone said, all of a sudden, you, out. Where do they go? His father is panicked, and his father has planned to take them out of the country. We got to get out of this crazy country. Lou remembers being held in his father's arms going up a plank into a ship. And as they get into the ship, and these are Jews fleeing the country, all of a sudden his father is standing there, and one would call it a panic attack, but it wasn't a panic attack. He just had a horrible feeling. He said to his wife, we gotta get out, get out. And he takes the two older boys and Lou and carries them down the plank while all the other Jews are coming up the plank. That ship took off and was torpedoed. There was the grace of God in that moment to know, to get on. Where do they go? Where do they go? And they go to the father's sister's house. And they're there for a little bit of time. And Lou remembers, now, he's 7 years old. The Nazis coming down the street, sirens, and the Nazis coming, and up into the apartment and dragging out a Jewish family, beating them and putting them on and taking them away. He is standing watching it. Up in the apartment where his aunt lived and his father and mother were, he sees his father. Can you imagine the father looking at your son while the Nazis are there taking away? He comes upstairs and his father says, never, when you see the Nazis, run. They are taken, and you know the stories in Schindler's. They are stripped naked. They're given the yellow star. He's not allowed to go to school. He's not allowed to be out. And because they were middle class and had a cleaning lady who was German, said, do not get on the train. Because there was some Jews who said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? His mother insisted that they find hiding. So his poor father finds a family that will take his wife, will take him, and the two older boys, but they're not going to take the little one. He could cry. He would kill us all. Can you imagine at night what it was like for his mother and father holding each other and knowing they're going to give him up? How do you do that? A man who worked with his father in insurance, and we don't know which happened, which first. We don't know if Herman Scheltema went home and said to his wife, there's a Jewish man who works and he has a little boy, I want to take him in. Or was it the wife listening to her husband who said, let's do something? They offered to take him, and one day his father said to him, tomorrow I'm going to take you to my office. And he brings Lou to the office and says, this is Mr. Scheltema. He's going to outside, he's going to go walk to the corner. You're going to go outside and walk to the corner. When you get to the corner, take his hand. And his last words were, I'll see you when I can. That is seared into Lou's heart. At that age, you don't have the vocabulary to explain fear. You don't have the ability to understand what's going on, but you feel it all the time. And that fear is still in him today. He has suffered a life, but he has survived. And I am fortunate to be his partner in life. I am one that admire him. I will be brief and introduce this great man. I will tell you, when people ask me who he is, I say he's remarkable. He came to this country with a suitcase, not speaking a word of English. He went to school, he became an engineer, he married. He then became a patent attorney. He then, after he retires, goes to Yale and studies astronomy. But the key that you need to know is that his wife had 3 strokes, and for 30 years, Lou took care of her, in a loving, loving way. And I will tell you one more thing, he has a great sense of humor. So with that, I introduce the remarkable Lou Reens.
Mark, thank you, Jean. That was a beautiful introduction. So gorgeous. I know you were a chaplain, but you also are a spiritual director. That's a real course that she took for 2 years, just finished. I want to thank you for the wonderful contributions you made here. And with all the clapping here, before you came in, I went around the room trying to shake as many hands as I could, because I need your vote next year for the election. Sometime a year ago, or sometime before that, I had shown Jean a wonderful poem in Dutch, and I translated it for her, and she said, "Where did you get this original poem?" I said, the son of the Scheltema family gave that to me. She said, "We have to return it, give it back to them." I said, "I agree, but this now was many, many years after I got it back from the oldest son. How do I find the descendants?" Well, she started an inquiry and found through a librarian in Wilton, Connecticut, the name of one person with the same last name who turned out to be a relative. And he introduced me to the descendants. And so I talked to the descendant, and it was a great grandchild. And I said to her, "I have the original poem. It belongs in your family's hands, not in ours. I can mail it to you, or I can deliver it. How would you like it?" She said, "Deliver it." And that was last November. And so, all year long, we planned the trip. And on August 7th of this year, we had a commemoration in Zeist, that's a town near Amsterdam, where we celebrated the 80th year to the day when I went into shelter with the Scheltema's. And so this happened, and a couple of other things happened. We also unveiled a plaque on the house where I lived for 3 years, and you'll see much of that on the video. So I want to first thank Gary and Lee Schmaltz for enabling me to bring my story before you. And that story began as a boy in World War II, after the Nazis had invaded our country on May 10th, 1940. That's before you were born. I was born into a normal Jewish family life, peacefully living in a suburb of Amsterdam. But the Nazis forced us out, as Jean mentioned, and it was a very difficult situation. And my parents sought a place to hide. And as she mentioned, one was with the Scheltema family, of whom you will learn more from the video. And my parents found a place in a town called Uithoorn. It doesn't mean anything to you, but it's a little town along the major river of the Amstel. And on August 7th, we all left without suitcases, nothing in our hands to show that we were traveling. And I went with Mr. Scheltema on the train to Hilversum, to his house, where he introduced me to his family and the children. We escaped to our hiding places on August 7, 42. I was 8 years old. And we just celebrated this commemoration in the town in Zeist, in the Netherlands. I was in another town, Hilversum, where the house was, but the celebration occurred in the grandchild's home. And he's on the video, I think. I've never met any of the descendants, but this was the time when I could talk to them as a survivor of those days, of which they knew very, very little because the family didn't talk about it. One of them had heard my name a few times, and a few of them remember their grandmother a little bit, but not much, but I could tell them stories about the grandmother, their uncles and great uncles, and it was a good time for having this commemoration. And I was witness to the courage and risk which the Scheltemas took to take me in. I was not aware of it at the time, of course. I was 8 years old, what did I know? But I know now. Thank you to Jean. So I talk a lot about this, and I think it's time for the video. Thank you. I want to keep this in and maybe ad-lib a little bit where it's needed.
Because it seemed to me big. I remember seeing the room. I lived in the room up on the corner there. That was my room with my brother. But it was a good life here. I enjoyed it. We took friends. And we went to school together. It was good. In May 10th, 1940, we heard a terrible sound. And we looked out the window and we saw an enormous cloud of smoke rising over Schiphol, and that was the beginning of the war. And we didn't know that. I didn't know that, and it became very serious because my parents said, we have to flee. So we climbed, my parents, and we all climbed into my father's Citroën, and we went to a wagon, and we tried to escape on a boat. And at nighttime, I was on this boat, but my father didn't trust it. And I had to come off the boat. And it was a horrible night, very dramatic. It was full of fear, noise, darkness. It was not pleasant. I was at that time only 6 years old. And it became essential for my father to come off the boat. They took me down. I couldn't handle it. The steps were too big apart. I remember all that very clearly, and then we came back home here, and we had to face the war from here. And that's when the troubles began, because it was just difficult to go to school after the Germans said you could no longer go to school. I was there 1 year, I came out of school, my brothers came out of school. My oldest brother was bar mitzvah in this house, I remember it very well. And it was a complex, difficult situation because of the presence of the Nazis and what was happening outside our house. The safety in the house was gone. You didn't feel safe. And then came the regulation that all Jews have to come out and they cannot live in Amstelveen anymore. So we left. And we had to go through a cleansing process in which all people were undressed in various ways, and we had to be inspected, and then we went back into the city, in the area where we had lived in before, but this time it was with my father's sister and family of the Keveringerstraat, and that's where we ended up for a couple of months. It was a terrible time. It was very fearful, difficult, and uncertain. Felt insecure. It was complicated. For me, I remember the start of the war, and then things got worse, and it became very difficult. And so that's how we started this, and then the process continued in Amsterdam. But it was a very, very big shock for me to have to leave. Because I learned to read, I learned to write, I did all the things a schoolboy does, because I went to school here. And then had to come to the hall. And I was 8 years old. And that's when we went to live in Amsterdam.
Restrictions on Jews, which we were, began very quickly. We were forced to wear a Jewish star, like on the right side. I wore one, and like this man did. And I could not, it was not like go swimming in a pool in Amsterdam. And finally, in the spring of 42, we were forced out of our house. We literally were just told, you have to go to Amsterdam, and live in a river neighborhood. And we moved in with my brother's sister op de Gevelingenstraat. It was a tough time. During the spring, after we were out of our home, forced out of our home, we had to go through a cleaning period I mentioned before. And then we moved in the Gevelingenstraat.
This is the number 11 Gevelingenstraat, where we were forced to go after we were kicked out of the house from Amstelveen by the Nazis. You remember that this neighborhood was permitted to be used by Jews. As a result, there were about 15,000 Jewish families living in this part of the city. It's called the River neighborhood of Amsterdam, where we lived with my father's sister family who had a home here at the level. And because we had to leave and live with them, we were only given those rooms for which they had room. And I ended up living in the attic with my brothers, and my parents lived in another room in the middle floors. And I remember we were here from about April, May of 1942 until August of 1942, a period of 2.5 months or so. And during one night, but there was this occasion for this woman in August of 1942 to howl literally all night long because she was being forced out of her apartment into a collection square where Jews were assembled and then sent by train to Westerbork for eventual transfer to the concentration camp. And nobody knew what was going to happen, but they feared the worst. Now, it happened that my family had been warned by a German maid who came to work for my mother. And she had warned her, be careful, the Nazis are trying to get rid of the Jews. So be very cautious. And my mother took that to heed. And so she insisted, as she was the driving force, that drove my father to look for places to hide. He ended up, through a friend of the family, or to a friend that he met at his business, who found him a place to hide with his 2 older sons. But he decided that I needed a more country-like environment. And then one of his partners, Schelfma, came to him and offered him assistance to take one child. And he selected me, and I went with Schelfma from here to his office, and then from the office directly to Hilversum. And that's how we escaped.
What did Herman do when he heard his father talk about the Nazis and what they did? Was he on the train going home and and thinking, I have to tell Eugenia we have to do something? Or did Eugenia, listening to him, say, Herman, we have to do something? Who said it? And when they helped each other at night in bed, how on earth did they say, we have to tell Clementine, we have to tell Martin, we have to tell Gaius, DNAs, they have to risk their lives too, because they knew what they were doing was risking their lives. And then how did Herman, whose parents lived nearby, how did he go to his mother and father and say, we're going to take in a little Jewish boy? And they would say, who is he? We don't know. He's Herman Reens' son.
And here is where the story began for me. In 1942, the Germans issued an edict where all the Jews had to be moved from their homes and transferred to the cities. And we were forced out of our house and through a horrible process where we had to be cleansed. And we were all undressed and half naked, together with neighbors and other Jews from all over the town, and forced into the ghetto in Amsterdam, in the river neighborhood. It became extremely dangerous because I had witnessed a Jewish family being pulled out of their house on the Gevelingenstraat and forced into a paddy wagon and taken away. And my father, who saw me on the street wearing a Jewish star, and he said, we have to leave. And my mother was very, very strong in making it happen. And so they found a place in Uithoorn, and Herman Seltma volunteered, came over to my father, because they shared an office in this building, 428 Keizersgracht. I remember this location and this building because my father began his insurance career with Schlecker that was occupying this entire building for insurance. And he worked very hard at it. At one time, he had insured all the window washers in Amsterdam. And we used to walk the street, and he would hear from above, hello, Mr. Reens. And they looked up, and there was a window washer who knew that he was representing them. So that was a fun thing. Inscribed in my mind are the numbers on the side of the door, 428 and 430, which signify the Keizersgracht address of my father's business at Schlecker's. And he always, when I came here, would give me a chocolate bar, and then we would do our usual thing inside. But today, 80 years ago, on August 7, 1942, he brought me in. We went upstairs, he introduced me to Herman Seltma, and he told me, follow Mr. Seltma. And he walks out the door, and I had no suitcase, I had nothing with me, I was just took his hand, Mr. Seltma's hand, a few meters behind me and we walked to the Centraalstation, where we took the train to Hilversum. And this was the start of being in hiding with the Seltmas. It was a very awkward way, because it was done without warning, without really any significant explanation of what was going to happen. But I was old enough to know that it was important for us to survive, for me to survive, that I not speak about it. So I followed instructions. I went out this door, and I followed Mr. Seltma. He gave me his hand, we held hands, and he took me to the Centraalstation. And that's the start of the onderduiking, or the hiding, in 1942. And that was a significant event for me. I
I was too young to really appreciate the dangers involved, but I understood enough to keep my mouth shut, and that was important. That's how I survived.
Being 8 years old, I knew and understood why I left my family and went to a strange family. I felt, however, abandoned, alone, and bewildered by the sudden changes in my life. The risk to the Southerners was just enormous, as well as to their children, all five of them, and as well as his parents who lived down the street of the Utrecht. But they endured all this pressure and took tremendously good care of me. I was blonde and I could pass as a part of the family. I was allowed outside in the ground. Each of the South of us participated in teaching me because I could not go to school. That would have been horrible. Herman and the entire family dealt with all the feel they felt while knowing what tragedy was taking place elsewhere in the country. Yet during 1944, the children participated in underground activities. I don't know what it was, but I think a lot of it was that were important the traffic on the Utrecht vet. I don't know how they used that information, but it was important. And without warning, I remember the day when the boys were all out of the house. I had the feeling they were warned. The Nazis came to take the boys out of the house and send them to Germany to work, but they weren't there. And I remember I had a stamp album because Mr. Seltman had given me a stamp album to teach me how to collect stamps. He also had taught me how to play chess. He was the one terrific guy to have as a grandfather. It was just an unusual. So I opened my stamp album to Germany, hoping to distract the German soldiers. This is your grandmother who really took care of me, cared for me, guided me. She was very lovely and kind to me and tolerant, even though I sneaked upstairs in the attic during the terribly 44-45 winter when I went and stole an apple out of turn. She didn't get angry. She explained that everybody had to participate in the food. I remained with the Southern Mouse for almost 3 years. They treated me as a part of the family. Not only did they teach me to play chess and introduce me to the fractional stamp, but my group at highest became sort of pals of mine. And Hans taught me how to build the crystal radio, which then became a source of information of the progress of the war, which they very carefully showed on a map with pins that was on the door on the inside of the closet. I can't tell you where the closet door was, but I remember that the map was there. I became extremely close and attached to Clementine. She was sort of like a mother figure. She was 20, I was only 8 or 9. She was very kind to me. I can remember her deep, resonant voice. That's still there. And there are other memories with her, but it's very hard to dig that deep because it's so long ago. But she was absolutely an essential ingredient to my survival and making it through the war at the Southwest. Here they are again, close up. And this is the house, wintertime. I listened to Eugenie to play the violin. And my job was to take care of the dog because he was howling like that. But that was part of living, right? Here's another. They called their home the Wilson. We often gathered in the room that was right below this little balcony, where we spent some time when the weather was warm. But they had a living room, and I remember spending a lot of time, winter time, in that living room with the entire family there. It was very comforting. It was very quiet. The long winter of '44 was behind us, and food had become a major factor. And I remember, as a matter of fact, game of Tina, going out on a bicycle with wooden tires. Can you imagine wooden tires for the noise they made? And she went to the farms and she came back with food that we all shared. I remember then the miracle of April 1945, when the Allied forces, instead of dropping bombs, delivered food that was dropped by parachute up on the hay behind the house. And the Lancaster bombers did that. I went to the area where they dropped it and brought the goods back. And they retrieved all sorts of tasty things, including a bar chop. Then on May 5th, the Canadian forces came through the Utrecht Bay, went on to the center of Hilversum, and we were free. Free, free. And that's exactly what Hamlet Seltman wrote in his diary to indicate that we were all free. Yeah, I am. It was right after the war, the late war, early years after the war. I was me, just a boy. I was there because of it again, it's not my family. I must return to my immediate family, which had survived. I did not recognize my older brothers. The middle one could no longer walk. He had to learn all over again. And my brother Paul had changed his ways. That did not become apparent until he got old. This is a later picture after the war of me, my brothers. Paul on the left, Yis on the right, and me in front. And we all had, and I had survived because of the courage of Herman, Eugenie, their children, and his parents. During the summer of '45, we were given access to a house in Amsterdam. The roof that was made of straw. But after the Russians occupied Czechoslovakia, my father said, no more wars. And he sent me and my brother to America. I was 14 when I came here in February. Came here February 1, 1948. My brother Paul went to work right away in Rhode Island, where he worked in the factory. But he said to himself and to me, work was not for him. And he went to California with Mary Sparniak. That's a whole story in and of itself. Because when he came back, it was full of lice. He had to be legalized. So that was America for him. He went back to home. This is me and my father. By this time, I'd grown up enough to realize I did not want to go back to home. I liked it here. I liked it in America. It was comfortable. I could forget all the miseries and the other pains that I felt. And besides, I hadn't really spent as many years with my family as is normal. And that had an impact on me. But I don't want to go into that unless you all become a psychiatrist. And I was 16 at the time. My father was holding me, pointing to Gene, was holding on tight, hoping to bring me back, but I did not go back. Never did. I came for a visit. I came to visit from time to time, and one of the visits was with Noor and Hans. At that time, Hans gave me, he came back, and he showed me the original of the poem. And give it back to your family, which you have, okay? I have copies, so don't worry about that. But it's time for me to return the favor and let you resume your commemoration in your minds of Herman and Eugene. This was your family after the war. The new people in part of it, you recognize yourselves? You ever met some of them? I never met them. I think this was Sky's over here. And Martin and his wife. Dionex, Hans. And so life continues. I went to law school, became a lawyer, became a patent attorney, and started a life and a family in Connecticut. And was always remembering the gift of life given to me by Selfness. They didn't just give me life, they saved other lives, future generations. For this, I'm entirely and very grateful. This is my family, this is just one half of my family. I'm in the middle. My two grandsons are here today on both sides of me. David on the left, Philip on the right. And that's Nathan and Asher and Sammy on the right, held by our son Dan. 7 men. There's somebody missing. There he is. Born just a couple of months ago. So that's a wonderful way to show the impact and effect of what Herman and Eugenie did for me. Thank you.
Quite a remarkable story for sure. This is an opportunity to ask Lou any questions of his life, or his life there. So if anybody has that, I'll bring the microphone and we'll get one microphone here. You got that, Lou? I don't know if you realize, in Lou's case, he mentioned he was blonde and blue-eyed, lots of blonde hair like I had when I was 8. All gone, for sure. But remarkable, because that did allow him to live in that family and actually play a little bit outside, I believe, because he was not suspected to being Jewish the way he looked and grew up, for sure. But people have some questions, and I'll take it. Yeah.
Yes, Melissa.
Where was the rest of your family?
Well, my parents and my 2 brothers had found a place about 10 miles from where I was, but I didn't know. And it was in a house, in a farmhouse, that was right on the Amstel River in a town called Uithoorn. And they were in hiding, and they were living exactly like Aunt Frank, in an attic. And they couldn't go out. And the only time they were allowed to go outside was at night, sitting between blankets, couldn't walk. And my middle brother lost his ability to walk. He regained it, but the war had a terrible impact on them. And it's too difficult to go into it in detail, but you can ask questions. Anybody else? Yes?
Approximately how many Jews were there in Holland, and what percent survived?
Oh, well, you know, the video here, can you show them the portion? Are you interested in seeing them? Because a very important part, well, there was a monument that was built of bricks, one brick for each person that was killed during the war in Holland. It was Jewish. There were 102,000 bricks with names, and I'd taken my grandchildren there, and I showed them the names, And my oldest grandson counted over 200 Jewish names with the name Reens. Most of them were relatives, including my grandmother and an uncle of my brother of my father's. So yes, that was about the number. It wasn't a good place to be as a Jew in the war.
Lou told me a story this afternoon that really, I think we're all aware that there was 6 million Jews killed by the Nazis during the war. And in this case, the resistance protected and saved 1 out of 10 of those people. So when you look at Lou and his family now that survived, that were protected by the resistance of the Nazis at that time, it's remarkable. So we're thankful for Lou to be here, thankful for the people that protected him. And frankly, just like if this story is of interest to you, there's another family here in Mary Sands called Zawan. Rud and Leva Zawan. Leva plays pickleball and some tennis or whatever. They were part of the resistance. They also were in Holland, in the Netherlands. Have another story that is really shows the real effect of the resistance that helped protect pilots and the Jewish people that were being hidden. So it's such a powerful story that Lou and Jean and I, with Gary, we've talked about the possibility that becomes another speaker series function, is talking about the resistance in Europe and what people have done, risking their lives to save other people. And I know it to be a remarkable story, and hopefully it's something that we can bring back to you, next spring, in the year, or whatever. But I think you'd be impressed with the overall effort. Lou's story is just a small part of what was happening throughout Europe to protect the Jews and other people from the Nazis at that point.
Lee, there was somebody a gentleman there, had a question. Yes, sir.
Lou, do you have an opinion as to what, if anything, more should have been done by England, France, U.S. in the late 30s to have stopped Germany, Hitler? I know we didn't want to go to war. I know we all went to war because we were attacked by the Japanese and the Axis. But was there anything on your mind that we should have known earlier?
Well, our government, the United States government, was well aware of what the Germans were doing by 1942-43 period. And they had been received information, but Roosevelt was very concerned about diverting airplanes from their regular obligations to fight the Germans in a regular way, and didn't want to divert it, so nothing was done. A lot could have been done, but this is hindsight. This was wartime. You can't fault. You can't argue with that. And but some years ago, I gave a talk in memory of Memorial Day to honor the soldiers who gave their lives in a way so I could live, because without them, I wouldn't be here today. So, I survived, and I was lucky. I can tell you stories about survival you wouldn't believe. It's so remarkable. Anyway, I don't want to take the time until I get permission from Gary to do that.
Margie?
Yes, ma'am.
How many of these children are there?
I'm sorry?
How many children were protected like this?
I mean, over the whole war period? Well, there were 1 out of 10 children survived. Jewish children survived from the whole war, over the all of Europe. So there were 6 million Jews were killed, and you can come up with probably 1 million children. And if you go to Israel, to the Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum there, they have one building with over 1 million lights, each light representing the life of a child. It was very difficult for me to see that. I had a hard time. Yes, go ahead. Yes, by all means.
At the end of the Second World War, the State Department here in the United States was very resistant to allowing immigrants to come in. And I wonder what your experience was coming to the United States, if you had any difficulty and any...
Yeah, I was blessed in a way, you know. I came here at the age of 14 and I needed to go to school. So I was able to get into a boarding school in Connecticut. And some friend of my father's, I think, paid for that. And so there were a lot of Jewish students in the school, and I was protected in a way from the anti-Semitic issues that was often in the case, but it never, the fear and the concern never left me. I was always concerned. My oldest son became an evangelical Christian. His brother became an Orthodox Jew living in Israel. I mean, you can't ask a more conflicting situation. It shows I have my hands in both sides of the heavens when the time comes. But, you know, in a way, I can't help but feel that my oldest son was looking to sit with the enemy, so to speak. And I can't forget that. That's the best answer I can give you. It's as honest as I can be. Any other questions?
Did you take your story for Yad Vashem? Did you?
Which story?
The story that you're telling. My stepfather had a similar story, and they had him go and take his history the way he did.
Yes, my story was written down by Spielberg. I recorded with Spielberg in a place out in California. And the group that I belong to in Connecticut, we created a film which is called 1 out of 10. I have a number of copies here at home. And it deals with 10 members of this group. Each of them survived, but they're difficult stories. And this one is extraordinarily complicated and difficult to hear and listen to, but they survived. And they made a life for themselves, and they did it well because excuse me, sorry. They did well for themselves, and it was partly because of their experience. You would think that someone that's that young cannot survive well, and I must say, I had met a number of them that could not handle it, but I also met some that were extraordinarily successful and adopted and came to America, and that was the beauty of coming to America, and that's why I didn't want to leave. I liked it here. I still like it here.
Don't leave.
Yes. Yes, sir.
So Lou, in the 3 years that you were sheltered by the family, were there any close calls being identified by the Nazis? Were there any
No, we did have a surprise visit by the Nazis, but they were looking for young men of an age where they could take them and send them to Germany to do work in the factories. But the young men in our house had been warned, and they weren't there. But I myself was not exposed to any dangers in that way. I was outside, I could play. I remember going skating and doing things. It was a rare gift. As a matter of fact, there was a student at the University of Utrecht in Holland who got hold of a diary written by Mr. Schoutman, He had written that diary very carefully, not revealing who I was and what he had done, but he kept writing about all the details of what happened every day. That woman, the young woman who wrote about that, wrote a thesis. It was about 10,000 words. I have it here in my computer. Half of it, 5,000 words, are about me. I name it because I was one of the few young Jewish persons who was allowed to be outside. I was not confined to inside an attic like Anne Frank. I was allowed free to go, and that was rare. And maybe that's why I'm as brilliant as I am today. Thank you.
Sure.
It's my knee. That's okay. I don't need that.
I'm so glad that you had your light fall jacket on tonight. We've had a real good story tonight. Thanks so much for being here and to witness this. And it kind of tells a bigger picture about who we are at Mariner Sands. That every person has a neighbor right next door that has an incredible story to tell. And the people here at Mariner Sands have the biggest hearts of anybody in all the state of Florida. Because when we hear each other's stories, we find a whole new way to love one another and accept one another despite any kind of differences that we might have. That's a good thing about Mariner Sands. So as we go tonight, just want you to know a couple little housekeeping things that I want to mention. There's a tree out under our patio out in the front. It's called a white dove tree, and it has little doves on it that have the names of children who would like to have gifts. They come from families that are poverty-stricken, and they come through the United Way of Martin County and the House of Hope. And so they're referred to us, and so this is one of the ways that we reach out to kids. So if you want to take one of those little doves on your way out, that's fine. I like to see a bare tree in that particular reason, so good. Other than that, like I say, there's a number of things. We're coming into the holiday season, and for those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, you may be here, you may be going away. We have a lot to be thankful for. If you want, on Thanksgiving morning at 9:30, we'll have a short half-hour service, just a service of thanks. You're welcome to come and be a part of it. It's not sectarian, it's not Protestant, Catholic, it's just us giving thanks, and you're welcome to be here on Thursday morning of Thanksgiving Day. And then, of course, we have Christmas and Christmas service, Christmas Eve Mass, and also there'll be Hanukkah memorial, some way to remember our Jewish friends as well. To all of you, thank you so much for being here, and I wish you all God's best. Good night.